Hey, did you know that a bunch of wadding or batting is made with plastic? Most of the stuff that you see in your typical craft shop is made with polyester or a polycotton mix. Now you can use 100% cotton or wool or bamboo wadding or batting or any other sustainable alternatives, but why spend that money when you can do the most sustainable thing and use what you already have? My two favorite wadding alternatives are old blankets and teeny tiny fabric scraps. Today I'm going to make a quilted zip bag using both alternatives, the blanket and the teeny tiny scraps, and show you what they look like. Let's get started. Here are my pieces cut out for the first bag. It's cut by 13 by 8 inches or roughly 33 by like 20.3 centimeters. And so I've got two of my outer fabric, two of my lining, I've got a zipper here, and I'm going to do the blanket option first. So I'm going to quilt the blanket pieces to my outer fabric and we'll put this bag together. The first thing I'm doing is taking an iron erasable pen and I'm just marking out my quilting lines onto my main fabric. Once your lines are drawn, you'll start sewing from the middle, starting in the center and working outwards. Reduces a bunch of the fabric bunching that you could get when quilting. You're going to clip your blanket to your main fabric and then you'll start to sew again from the middle, working your way outwards from that point. I like to sew with the main fabric facing upwards just so that I can see the right side of the fabric, what I'm working with, and how tight I need to pull the fabric as I'm quilting just to make sure it looks good. So once you've done that, you're going to iron away your pin lines and then you'll trim away any of the excess blanket that you've got from sewing. So this is a bit of like a blanket stretch that happened when I sewed, so I'm just trimming away that little bit of excess. Next, you're going to grab your zipper. I'm using a continuous zip that I've cut to length, but you can use one that you've already bought with a stopper and the pull already on it if that works for you. If you are using a continuous zip and you've cut it to length, you're going to need to add your zipper pull, and then we'll clip our zipper to our main fabric and then we'll clip our lining on top of that and make like a bit of a sandwich for our zipper. So you'll use a zipper foot to sew along this seam up here, but you're going to want to stop when you get into the middle where the zipper pull is. And when you get to that zipper pull, you're going to keep your needle down, lift the presser foot and pull the zipper pull out of the way, put the presser foot back down and keep on sewing. So here I am reaching the zipper pull. I've put my needle down, lifted my presser foot up, and I'm just gonna move the zipper pull back and out of the way from my needle. And then I'll put my presser foot down and I'll continue to sew along that seam. And then we'll just do the same thing on the other side of the zip, making that little sandwich with our main fabric and our lining. Once both sides are on, I top stitch next to the zip and then I stitch down along the side of the zipper just so that the pull of the zipper doesn't accidentally come off. I also forgot to mention these at the beginning, but these are little webbing tabs that I use just because I had webbing lying around, but you can use anything like ribbons or you can make tabs out of your fabric if you want, but I just put these at the end of the zippers just so that when the bag is constructed, it makes it easier to open and close your bag. So you're just going to sew them at the edge in the middle where your zip is. Once those tabs are on, we'll then sew our main and our lining fabrics into tubes. Make sure that you leave a gap in the lining for flipping it later in the process. Bring all of the layers together at the side and you're going to sew in the middle where the tabs are, just in the middle. So you're not sewing that entire seam closed, just that little bit that's in the middle. And then you'll go ahead and do the other side as well. Next, I'm going to cut about 1¼ inches squares in all 4 corners. This is so that we can box off the bag a bit later. Next, you're going to make about 8 stitches now at the side seams, 4 on the main fabric and then 4 on the lining fabric. All of them are on the side seam where you did that earlier stitch closing the tab in the middle. So you're just basically making a full continuous stitch along that side seam, but this time you're separating it between just the lining and just the main fabric. So be careful not to catch the lining fabric as you sew the main fabric and vice versa when you do the lining. Just take it nice and slow. These are small stitches. There are 8 of them. Once you've sewn the side seams together, now you're going to box off all of the 8 corners. Now we're ready to flip our bag. Carefully pull the bag through the gap we left in the lining. And if you're like me and you left your zip closed, that's totally okay. You just need to maneuver the pool open and then you can continue flipping the rest of the bag. And then the last thing that we need to do is we need to stitch the gap in the lining closed. And there we go, the bag is finished. So let's make another one using the teeny tiny scraps. For our second wadding alternative method, we're going to be cutting up these scrap pieces into teeny tiny pieces. This is probably my favorite method to use as an alternative for wadding, just because it is mostly zero waste. You can use up the scraps from cutting out this project and loads of scraps from previous projects in the past. So the first thing that you just need to do is you need to take your scraps and you do need to cut them up into tinier pieces. Once you've cut up all your scraps into tiny pieces, you'll need 2 more pieces of fabric that are cut the same size as your main fabric. This is different from your lining fabric and different from your main fabric. We're going to use this to sandwich the teeny tiny pieces between the main fabric and this fabric. So this fabric is not going to be visible at all. In this video, I did lay out the tiny pieces onto my main fabric. What I would recommend doing next time, and what I did for the other side, is actually laying out the tiny pieces onto that in between fabric that you're not going to see. That way it just means that you can place the main fabric on top, sandwich your tiny pieces, and sew with the main fabric facing upwards. I didn't do that in this video, but that's what I would recommend for future. So what you're just going to need to do is take these teeny tiny scraps and lay them out as kind of even as you can. Just what you want to try to avoid is any big lumps in one particular place. So you're just going to lay them out, kind of press them down, see how they feel, and lay out more as needed. Once you're happy with how the scraps are laid out, you're going to take your other piece of fabric and lay it on top. Again, I recommend that the piece that you place on top is actually your main fabric and not your in-between fabric like I have here. So once you have the tiny scrap sandwiched between the 2 fabrics, you're going to take your clips or your pins and you're going to clip it down and pin it down as best as you can to keep them in place as you sew. From here, it's essentially the same method as we did with the blanket. So again, you're going to be starting from the middle of your fabric and you're going to sew from the middle, working your way outwards. Again, on your main fabric, draw your quilting lines first and then sandwich it on top. I did it the other way in this video and it caused some problems. So just have the in-between fabric on the bottom, teeny tiny scraps in the middle, main fabric with your quilting lines on top, and then sew from the middle and work your way outwards. Once all of your quilting lines are sewn, again, you're just going to trim off some of the excess around your main fabric. So you want to essentially try to keep the same size and shape of your main fabric and just cut off the extra. Somehow I sewed this one a bit wonky, so we're just going to trim off the extra bits from the sides. Once you've done one panel, you're then going to do the same thing on the other panel so that you've got two main fabric panels. Because you are using teeny tiny scraps, there might be like a couple of differences. For example, in one of my panels, I had ended up adding more teeny tiny scraps and it was a little bit lumpier in some parts. So it is very much a trial and error process. I really like this method for the eco-friendly nature of it. From here, the construction of the bag is the exact same as we did before, so I'm not going to bore you with repeating that whole process again here. So here's a little sped up clip of me just sewing a little bit of this bag. These are the finished bags. Can you tell which one's which? This one's the blanket, this one's the teeny tiny scraps. Let's take a closer look. This is the blanket one. This is the teeny tiny scraps one. So this is the blanket one. This is the teeny tiny scraps one. You can kind of tell that like the teeny tiny scrap one is a bit firmer, but I also used a very lightweight blanket when I made the blanket one. And the teeny tiny scraps obviously make it a bit thicker. It is a little bit lumpy in some places, but I think on such a small product, like you don't notice it that much. But yeah, these are both of the bags. Blanket one has a blue lining and the teeny tiny scraps has a brown lining. So I think they're both really cute. And I do think they make really good alternatives for polyester or polycotton wadding. I've only ever tried making these small quilted projects like these zip bags or hot water bottle covers. I've not tried doing something bigger like clothes or a blanket using wadding or batting alternatives. So I would be keen to hear from other sewists out there who have done larger scale projects using some sort of wadding or batting alternative and what your results were. Maybe that should be a future video of mine. If you enjoyed this video, do hit subscribe. Your support really matters to me. And until next time, bye!